Well, hello, Zach. I've noticed in my job that you would know the answer to this, that newsrooms do appear to be shrinking. And the thing that I've noticed most is that the turnaround and the speed that journalists require their information is very fast. It used to be we'd get a day for an interview, be like, can they talk to me in the next half hour? And it's always over the phone. They used to come and meet people. That's happening less and less. And recently I've got two examples. I had a journalist phone just asking for commentary on loyalty cards and that sort of thing. And while we were talking, she said, well, I might as well interview you. And I thought, well, you know, it's fine, but is that going to be a realistic snapshot of our society, or is it going to be me? And the other thing too is I have journalists asking for prompting expert opinions, saying, can you get someone to say this? And we have experts, and they do have opinions, and sometimes their opinions vary to the story, and that'll get dropped from the story. And again, is that actually a realistic and accurate snapshot of what the research-led thinking is saying? Or is it just pushing a particular news agenda? The other thing I would say to PR people particularly is don't bite the hand that feeds you. This is not a time to throw in your puff, and it's not a time to just get the junk into the media because you're trying to trip up a busy journalist. We all know about the media advertising consumer sort of feeding wheel, and if we kill the media off, then we'll all lose out in telling our own stories. So it's pointless trying to get your puff in. It's not going to advance any readership or audience growth. It's just going to kill it. That's just my thing there. And I was told recently by a business news print editor who's not here today, the one tool she uses to decide whether a story is going to fit with her news agenda is, will this help my readers make more money? And if it doesn't, it just goes into the slush pile. And I think actually we can use that as a rule of thumb. Will this enhance the readers or the audiences? I mean, you can push out your own corporate agenda, but will this actually enhance the audiences or the people who are consuming the media? And will it actually ultimately have positive change in society? I mean, it's a bit grand if you're talking about lipstick, but think about that from the consumer's view, not your agenda from the organisation. In terms of audience demographic, I think no, that changing demographics is nothing new. I think that actually it's about the formats we're receiving the media from, and it's, I mean, for example, I read the New Zealand Herald on the Link bus, and they have little bulletins. It's kind of like a la teletext, but gives me little snippets in the morning. And then of course I have the Twitter feed. I'm one of those people that gets the Guardian, ABC, BBC, CNN, news media, and follow journalists, and have my Twitter feed of rotating stories. Emails from media, which I've pretty much culled now because I'm sick of the inbox, and Google alerts, that sort of thing. So in this instant, I think that what becomes important is the headline of the story, and I've got a colleague sitting over there who said that sometimes actually all we need is the headline to get a wide look at the media and what's happening across the globe, and then we can use the read more button and get into those stories. I mean, today's headlines were pilot error blamed in Air New Zealand, Perpignan crash, warning over bogus GST, ETS price hikes, Robin Brooke and a new teen sex claims. That's enough for me. And then I can read more. And and for example on Twitter you'd get Michael Jackson is dead. I mean, you don't need much more than that, and then you can pick up your traditional media and keep going with it. So I think, and obviously there's the new formats, and there's a lot more sort of, I think what's happening is we're now seeing the audiences choosing what they value as news, and what they value as news might not be what you guys are putting in the news. They might value something completely differently, and that way they can gain it from Twitter, from Facebook, from YouTube, from Trade Me, and they put a different value on what they're trying to consume. And I think there's a push-pull thing that can happen now with PR. For example, last year on Twitter, the former ANZ CEO in Australia, Brian Hartzer, announced his resignation on Twitter, saying, "Folks, this is my last tweet as I've resigned to pursue an overseas opportunity. Thanks for your continued support for ANZ, all the best." And that's a way of, he drew the media to that story. They didn't announce it, that was it. And I think there is potential for people to do that. Nearly done. And the same with last year, Aisling Symes, when her body was found, it was all on Twitter, and then eventually it was responded to on the traditional news media sources, but we'd already seen TwitPics, and we'd already seen a bunch of stuff happening, and perhaps media can start using that tool and stop being so big in the storytelling, you could pull it back a bit and actually take a twit pick and put a headline, and actually that's conveying the news as well. And you might get a whole new audience following who like that kind of short news. You don't have to go and send a journal off to write an article for half an hour. I don't, just a thought. I won't talk about that. But one thing I do want to raise with the panel is how you set your news agenda, because I spoke to Mariama prior to this, and we were talking about how pole dancing mothers in Invercargill rates. And I get that, but I pitch stories that I think actually do have relevance, and I think they have a very strong stamp in changing society as well. For example, we had a child witness report released in April this year. It was child witnesses in the New Zealand criminal courts. And it was basically, in a nutshell, it was about how children in the criminal justice system spend up to 2 years waiting to get to the end of the court process as witnesses to usually a crime against them, otherwise a horrific crime within their family. Massive report, 2 years in the making, had experts from the defence, prosecution, judiciary, all sorts, and it was a horrific outcome. And then it was supported by Simon Power and the Child Commissioner. And anyway, I spoke to a Sunday paper, not naming names, and they were worried about a 4-day time lag in the story. We got coverage, the news coverage. I said to them 2 weeks prior, I said, you can get access to all the report writers, you can then go off and get your own bits and part of the story and do a feature, because I think it's horrific, and Kiwis would probably want to know about it. Oh, 4 days. And I was thinking, what? 4 days? This is 2 years on the life of a child who's 2 to 6. And it's the only time I've kind of got really antsy about it, but ends up that a Saturday paper picked it up and did a fulsome feature on it and got the coverage. But I would have thought anyway, it just baffled me that a 4-day time lag was critical in a story it's much bigger than that. I wish I'd had pole dancing triplets, it would have been easier.